The spring wind of 1918 carried the scent of sagebrush across the Nevada hills. As Samuel Garrett sat on the weathered porch of his ranch house, hands wrapped around a tin cup of coffee that had long gone cold. His fingers, gnarled from 42 years of working cattle and breaking horses, trembled slightly as he set the cup down on the rail. Not from weakness, though, his 67 years had taken their toll, but from the weight of what he was about to say. Beside him sat his grandson, William Garrett Jr., 20 years old and trying hard not to show his fear. The boy wore his army uniform stiff and knew the khaki wool still creased from the supply depot. Tomorrow morning he would board the train in Hawthorne, the same train that ran on the same tracks that had brought so much to this family. He would ride east, then catch a ship to France, to the war that was consuming Europe like a wildfire through dry timber. Sam had seen that look before. The wide eyes, the set jaw trying to mask uncertainty, the hands that could not quite stay still. He had worn that same expression once, though his battlefield had been different. His war had been against loneliness and doubt, against the voice that told him he was not good enough, that he should stay silent and let opportunity slip away like water through cupped hands. The old rancher looked toward the bedroom window where his wife lay sleeping. Eleanor, Ellie, the woman who had changed everything. The doctor had been that morning, his face grave as he spoke in low tones about influenza and weakened lungs and the limitations of modern medicine. The Spanish flu had swept through Nevada like an avenging angel, and even here 10 miles from town, it had found them. She might have days, she might have weeks. The doctor could not say. Will Jr. cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the desert silence. Grandson Sam corrected himself. The boy was named for his own son, who had been named William after Sam's father back in Missouri. 3 generations of Williams, each carrying forward what the ones before had built. "You scared?" Sam asked, his voice rougher than he intended. The young man nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed. "Yes, sir. I don't know if I have the courage for what's coming." Sam smiled, the expression tugging at the weathered creases of his face. The silver stubble on his jaw caught the late afternoon light. His hair, once dark brown and thick, had gone white as winter snow. But his eyes, those gray eyes that had seen so much, still held their clarity. "Let me tell you about courage, Will. Real courage. Not the kind they write about in dime novels or paint on recruiting posters. The kind that shows up when everything inside you is screaming to run, but you stand your ground anyway." He paused, gathering the memories like scattered cattle. They came reluctantly. At first, these images from 42 years past, but then they flooded in with surprising vividness. The dust, the heat, the sound of a train whistle, the feel of soft skin under his calloused palm. "Let me tell you about the day I stopped a woman from boarding a train. About the day I found the courage to ask for something I didn't deserve, and she found the courage to say yes." Will Jr. leaned forward, his fear momentarily forgotten. "Grandmother train story. Your grandmother wasn't my grandmother then. She was just Eleanor Ashford, a school teacher from Boston, who I'd never had the nerve to speak to. And if I hadn't done the most foolish, terrifying thing I'd ever done in my life, you wouldn't be sitting here. None of this would exist." Sam gestured at the ranch spread out before them. The barn he had built with his own hands. The corrals that held horses his son now trained. The rolling hills dotted with cattle bearing the Garrett brand. The schoolhouse visible in the distance where Ellie had taught 3 generations of children to read and cipher. "You want to know what makes a man? It's not a gun, it's not how much land you own, or how many head of cattle you can brand in a day. It's the ability to make a decision when nothing is certain and then live with the consequences of that choice come what may." The old man settled back in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. He had lost bulk over the years, his frame still broad, but no longer filled with the hard muscle of his youth. Age had whittled him down to sinew and bone and stubborn will. "Let me start at the beginning, before your grandmother, before this ranch, before any of it. Let me tell you about a young man who thought he had nothing to lose and everything to prove." The sun was dropping toward the western hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed too vivid to be real. In the distance, a coyote called to its mate, the sound lonesome and ancient. Sam took a breath, reached back through the years, and began. November 1876. The high desert of Nevada Territory wore winter like an uncomfortable coat. the cold cutting through everything but never quite settling in the way it did back east. Sam was 25 then, though he felt older. 3 years of building a ranch from nothing had a way of aging a man, adding lines to his face and calluses to his hands, and a kind of permanent weariness to his bones. He woke each morning at 4 when the stars were still bright and the world held its breath before dawn. The cabin was small, just one room with a stone fireplace and a bed he had built from pine logs. The floor was packed, earth swept clean, but never quite free of the red dust that seemed to get into everything. A table, 2 chairs, though he only ever used one, shelves for his few possessions, a Winchester 1873 rifle above the door, a Colt Peacemaker on the bedside table, oiled and ready, though he rarely needed it. The mornings were all the same. Pull on boots, stoke the fire, boil coffee in a battered tin pot, step outside into the cold where his breath made clouds in the dark air, walk the quarter-mile to the barn where his horses nickered softly at his approach, their warm breath steaming in the chill. Check the water, break the ice if needed, distribute hay, saddle up, ride out to where the cattle grazed, counting heads looking for signs of trouble. Predators, strays that had wandered toward the boundary where Hank Blackwood's land began. It was lonely work, the kind of lonely that settled into your chest and made a home there. Sam had chosen this life, deliberately had ridden west from Missouri with nothing but a horse and a saddle and a determination to build something that was entirely his. But choosing loneliness and living with it were different things. The ranch sat 10 miles north of Hawthorne, a mining town that had sprung up where silver ore came out of the ground in quantities that made men rich and desperate in equal measure. Sam's land was different. He had found it 3 years back, drawn by the presence of a natural spring that bubbled up from the rocks and fed a small creek that ran year-round. Water meant everything in the desert. With reliable water, a man could run cattle. With cattle, a man could build a future. He had 320 acres bought with money saved from 5 years of working other men's ranches, learning the business from the ground up. The land had cost him $400. The cattle had cost another 600 Longhorn crossbreeds that could survive on sparse desert grass and needed less water than the eastern breeds. The horses had cost 200 more, including the bay gelding he rode most days and the 3 mares he was breeding for stock. Everything he owned was tied up in this place. Every dollar, every drop of sweat, every hour of labor from dawn to dusk and sometimes beyond. He was proud of it, proud in a way he had never been proud of anything before. This was his. No one had given it to him. No one had made it easy. He had built it board by board, fence post by fence post, season by season. But at night, when the work was done and he sat alone in his cabin with only the fire for company, the pride felt hollow. He would eat his simple supper, beans and bacon usually, cornbread if he had taken the time to make it, coffee, always coffee, strong and black and bitter. Then he would sit and listen to the silence press in from all sides. No voice but his own, no laughter, no conversation. Just the crackle of the fire and the occasional settling of the logs and the wind that never quite stopped blowing across the desert. He told himself it was enough. He told himself that this was what he wanted. Independence. Self-reliance. A life built on his own terms without having to answer to anyone or depend on anyone or risk losing anyone the way his father had lost his mother. That memory was still sharp even after 9 years. His mother had died of consumption when Sam was 16, her lungs filling with fluid until she could not draw breath. He had watched her waste away over the course of 6 months, watched his father sit beside her bed and hold her hand and whisper things that Sam could not hear. And then she was gone, and his father had simply given up. Not all at once, not obviously, but the light had gone out of the older man's eyes. He worked the farm in Missouri without purpose, going through the motions, because he did not know what else to do. 2 years later, he had simply failed to wake up one morning, his heart having decided there was no point in continuing to beat. Sam had stood beside both their graves and made himself a promise. He would never be that weak. He would never give another person the power to destroy him like that. He would build something solid and lasting, something that could not be taken away by sickness or death or the simple cruelty of a world that did not care. So he had sold the farm, packed what little he owned, and ridden west. Away from the memories, away from the ghosts. towards something new. Nevada Territory in 1876 was raw and unfinished, a place where a man could disappear into the vastness and start over. Sam had worked as a ranch hand for 3 different outfits, learning everything he could: how to read the signs of weather in the clouds, how to track a stray cow by its hoof prints, how to break a horse without breaking its spirit, how to repair tack and build fence and treat illness in livestock. He had saved every dollar he did not need for basic survival. No whiskey, no gambling, no visits to the establishments that existed for lonely men with money in their pockets. He had a goal and everything else was a distraction. By the time he was 22, he had enough to buy land. By 23, he had cattle. By 24, he had a functioning ranch. By 25, he was starting to make a profit, small but steady, and he was utterly, completely alone. That was how things stood in September of 1876 when he rode into Hawthorne to buy supplies and saw her for the first time. The town was not much to look at: a single main street with false-fronted buildings on either side, a general store, a hotel that also served as a restaurant and saloon, an assayer's office where miners brought their ore, a livery stable, a blacksmith, a few other establishments of varying respectability, and a schoolhouse, small and plain, set back from the street on a patch of cleared ground. Sam had ridden past it 100 times without paying much attention. The town had hired a school teacher the year before, an older man from Sacramento who taught the basics and asked no questions and caused no trouble. Sam had no children and no interest in education beyond the reading and writing and basic arithmetic he had learned as a boy. But that September morning, as he rode past on his way to the general store, he heard something that made him slow his horse to a stop. A voice, clear and strong and somehow musical, reading aloud from a book. He could not see the speaker from the street, but the schoolhouse door was open to catch the breeze, and the words carried out into the morning air. Poetry. He recognized it as poetry, though he could not have named the poem or the author. Something about a river and the passage of time and the way water shapes stone. The voice gave each word weight and meaning, made them into something more than just sounds. Sam sat on his horse in the middle of the street, reins loose in his hands, and listened. Around him, the town went about its business. A wagon rattled past. Someone hammered at the blacksmith's shop. Dogs barked. But all Sam could hear was that voice transforming words on a page into something that stirred feelings he did not have names for. The reading ended. There was a moment of silence, then the sound of children's voices asking questions. The clear voice answered, patient and encouraging. Sam realized with a start that he had been sitting there for nearly 30 minutes. He dismounted, tied his horse to the rail in front of the general store, and found an excuse to walk past the schoolhouse. Just to see, just to know. Through the open door he caught a glimpse of her. Auburn hair pulled back in a simple style. A dress of dark blue cotton, practical and neat. She was writing on the chalkboard, her movements precise and confident. A group of children sat at rough desks, watching her with varying degrees of attention. She turned, and for just a moment, Sam saw her face. Young, he thought. Maybe 22 or 23. Fine features that spoke of good breeding. A serious expression focused on her task. Then she moved out of his line of sight, and he forced himself to keep walking before someone noticed him lurking like a fool. Back at the general store, he asked the proprietor, Mr. Hammond, about the new teacher. Miss Ashford, Hammond said, measuring out the coffee beans Sam had requested. Arrived 3 months back from Boston. Replaced old Mr. Peterson when he took sick and went back to California. School board hired her on recommendation. Educated woman. Maybe too educated for this place if you ask me. Sam had not asked, but Hammond continued anyway. She's got ideas about how things should be done. Teaching the girls same as the boys. Literature and science, not just reading and sums. Some folks appreciate it. Others think she's overstepping. Sam bought his supplies, loaded them onto his horse, and rode back to the ranch. But he could not stop thinking about that voice. About the way she had read those words like they mattered. About the glimpse he had caught of her through the schoolhouse door. Over the following weeks, he found reasons to ride into town more often than necessary. He needed nails for a fence repair. He wanted to check on a shipment of salt lick for the cattle. He should talk to the blacksmith about shoeing one of the horses. Each time he made sure his route took him past the schoolhouse around midday, when the children had their recess, and Miss Ashford would sometimes stand in the doorway watching her students play. He learned things about her through observation and the casual talk of townspeople. She boarded at Mrs. Fletcher's respectable establishment. She kept to herself, mostly though she was polite to everyone. She had been seen helping old Mrs. Lin, the Chinese widow who lived on the edge of town, carry groceries when most white folks pretended the Chinese did not exist. One afternoon in late September, Warren witnessed something that settled the matter of Eleanor Ashford's character in his mind. He was watering his horse at the public trough when he heard shouting from the schoolhouse. Three boys brothers from the Miller family were raising havoc, throwing rocks at the building and yelling insults. They were known troublemakers, their father too drunk most of the time to care what they did. Miss Ashford came out to confront them. Sam expected her to shout or threaten or maybe go fetch the sheriff. Instead, she walked up to the oldest boy, who was maybe 13 and already big for his age, and spoke to him in a voice too quiet for Sam to hear. The boy's face went red. He started to argue. She held up one hand, still speaking in that same calm tone. Then she did something unexpected. She smiled. Not a cruel smile or a mocking one. A real smile, warm and genuine, like she understood exactly why he was acting out and did not judge him for it. The boy's bluster deflated. His brothers shuffled their feet. Miss Ashford said something else, gestured toward the schoolhouse, and all three boys followed her inside. Through the open door, Sam could see her settling them at desks, handing them books, talking with them, like they were people worth her time. That was when he knew. When he understood that what he felt was not just attraction to a pretty face or a fine voice. It was respect, admiration, a recognition that this woman possessed qualities he valued. Kindness without weakness, strength without cruelty, the ability to see the good in people and call it forth. But knowing what he felt and doing anything about it were different matters entirely. Sam was a cowboy, a rancher if he was being generous, though his operation was small and barely profitable. He had dirt under his fingernails and calluses on his hands, and dust permanently ground into the creases of his skin. He lived in a one-room cabin 10 miles from town. He could read and write well enough to keep basic accounts and pen a simple letter, but he had never attended school beyond the age of 12. Miss Ashford was educated, cultured, from Boston, which might as well have been a different world. She read poetry and taught literature and spoke with a refined accent that marked her as someone who had been raised with advantages. What could he possibly offer someone like her? What right did he have to even think about approaching her? So he did nothing. He watched from a distance. He listened when people mentioned her name. He rode past the schoolhouse and told himself he was only passing through. He built an image of her in his mind from stolen glimpses and overheard conversations, and he told himself it was enough. October passed. November arrived with its sharp winds and sudden cold snaps. Sam continued his routine. Work, solitude, the occasional trip to town, the careful observation of a woman who had no idea he existed. Then on a Tuesday in mid-November, he was in the general store when he heard Hammond talking to another customer about the school board meeting. Fired her, Mom, Hammond was saying, shaking his head. Gave her a notice yesterday. Said her services were no longer required. Sam's hand stilled on the bag of flour he was examining. Miss Ashford? That's right. Some nonsense about her teaching methods being inappropriate, but everyone knows the real reason. What's the real reason? Hammond glanced around, then lowered his voice. Trevor Sykes, mine foreman's son, been sniffing around Miss Ashford since she got here. She rebuffed him politely but firmly. Trevor didn't take kindly to that, got his father to pressure the school board. Most of those board members either work at the mine or have business there. They caved. The other customer, a rancher Sam knew by sight, spat tobacco juice into the spittoon. Shame, my daughter learned more in 3 months with Miss Ashford than in 3 years with old Peterson. But that's how things work when you got money and influence. Sam finished his purchases in a daze. As he was leaving, he heard Hammond mention to someone else that Miss Ashford had purchased a train ticket, leaving Saturday, going back east. The words hit him like a physical blow. 4 days. She would be gone in 4 days, and he had never even spoken to her. That night, Sam could not sleep. He lay in his narrow bed and stared at the ceiling and tried to convince himself it did not matter. She was leaving. That was that. He would go back to his routine. The ranch, the work, the solitude. Except now, the solitude felt different. Before, it had been a choice, a deliberate construction. Now it felt like a cage. He thought about his father sitting beside his mother's grave, choosing to let his heart stop rather than face life without her. Sam had always seen that as weakness. But now in the darkness of his cabin, he wondered if maybe his father had just understood something about love and loss that Sam did not. Maybe some people were worth the risk. By Thursday, Sam had made his decision. He would go to the train station Saturday. He would speak to Miss Ashford. He would tell her what he had been too afraid to say. And if she laughed at him, or rejected him, or thought him a fool, well, at least he would have tried. He rehearsed what he would say, practiced different versions in his head as he worked, discarded most of them as too formal or too casual or too presumptuous. By Friday night, he had settled on simple honesty. He would tell her he admired her, that he thought she was remarkable, that he would like the chance to know her better. If she said no, he could live with that. What he could not live with was wondering what might have been if he had found the courage to ask. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold. Sam washed more carefully than usual, shaved, put on his cleanest shirt and the vest he saved for town. He spent 10 minutes trying to get his hair to lie flat before giving up. He saddled his horse, rode toward Hawthorne, and felt his stomach clench tighter with every mile. The train was not due until 10 o'clock. He arrived at 9:30, tied his horse, and stood on the platform trying to look like he had legitimate business there. Other people waited for the train. A family with luggage heading east. A businessman in a dark suit. Two miners who had obviously spent their last night in town at the saloon and were paying for it now. And then he saw her. Eleanor Ashford stood near the far end of the platform, a worn leather trunk at her feet. She wore a navy blue traveling dress and a bonnet that shadowed her face. Her posture was straight, almost defiant, but Sam could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands gripped her reticule too tightly. She looked like someone preparing to accept defeat, like someone who had tried and failed and was going home to admit it. Sam's carefully prepared words evaporated. His mouth went dry, his heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape. Every instinct told him to turn around, to walk away, to not make a fool of himself. Instead, he thought about his father, about dying with regrets, about spending the rest of his life wondering what if. He stepped forward. The train whistle sounded in the distance, the locomotive not yet visible but approaching fast. The conductor appeared, checking his pocket watch. "Train's on time, folks. 5 minutes to boarding." Miss Ashford picked up her trunk. It was clearly heavy, but she managed it with the same determined competence she seemed to bring to everything. She walked toward the passenger car, each step deliberate. Sam moved to intercept her. His boots sounded loud on the wooden platform. She did not notice him at first, focused on her task. Then he was there, directly in her path. His hand reached out almost of its own accord and closed gently around her wrist. "Miss Ashford," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Please wait." She stopped, turned. Her eyes, hazel with flecks of green and gold, met his. They were red-rimmed, he noticed. She had been crying, though her face showed no trace of tears now. "Sir, I don't know you," she said, her voice carrying the crisp pronunciation of educated New England. "And you are preventing me from boarding." Sam realized he was still holding her wrist. He did not let go, could not let go. This was his one chance, and if he released her now, she would step onto that train and disappear forever. "I know we haven't been properly introduced, ma'am, and I apologize for the presumption." The words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other. "But I couldn't let you leave without speaking my piece." He pulled off his hat with his free hand, an automatic gesture of respect drilled into him since childhood. His dark hair curled slightly, still damp from the water he had used to try to tame it. "My name is Samuel Garrett. I own a ranch about 10 miles north of here, and I've been working up the courage to speak to you for 2 months now. I'll be damned if I let you leave town before I do." Her eyes widened. Recognition flickered across her face. "I've seen you," she said slowly. "In town. You're the one who always tips his hat." "Yes, ma'am, that would be me." "Mr. Garrett, I appreciate whatever sentiment you wish to express, but my train is about to depart, and I have no reason to remain in this town." She tried to pull her wrist free, but his grip, though gentle, held firm. "That's where you're wrong, ma'am. You have at least one reason if you'll hear me out." The train appeared around the bend, its black bulk growing larger as it approached the station. Steam billowed white against the crystalline blue sky. The whistle blew again, long and mournful. Sam knew he had maybe 60 seconds before she boarded and was lost to him. The words he had planned, the careful speeches he had rehearsed, and all fled. He was left with only the raw truth. I know what happened with the school board. I know those small-minded fools were too stupid to appreciate what they had in a teacher like you. And I know you probably think this whole territory is full of ignorant men who don't value an educated woman. That assessment has proven accurate in my experience, she said coldly, though something in his words made her pause. I can't speak for everyone in Hawthorne, Miss Ashford, but I can speak for myself. He took a deep breath, his hand tightening on the brim of his hat, crushing the felt. This was it. Everything balanced on what he said next. I have a ranch 10 miles north of here, up in the hills where there's good grass and water. It's not much yet, but I've been building it for 3 years now, and it's starting to prosper. I have cattle, horses, and enough land to support a family. That's very nice for you, Mr. Garrett, but I fail to see what it has to do with me. Even as she spoke, Sam saw her pulse quickening at the base of her throat, saw the way her free hand had gone still, no longer reaching for her trunk. She was listening, really listening. I'm asking you to give me a chance, Miss Ashford. The words came from somewhere deep inside him, from the part that had watched her teach and help Mrs. Lynn and stand up to those Miller boys. Don't get on that train. Stay in Hawthorne. Let me court you properly and see if maybe we couldn't build something together. He rushed on before she could interrupt. I know this is sudden, and I know I'm not the kind of man you're probably used to back east. But I swear to you, I'm honest and hardworking, and I would treat you with the respect you deserve. Last call for boarding, the conductor shouted, his voice carrying across the platform. All aboard for Reno, Sacramento, and points east. Miss Ashford stood frozen, 1 foot poised, as if to step toward the train, her mind clearly reeling. Sam could see the conflict in her eyes, logic warring with something else, fear battling hope. Mr. Garrett, you don't know me, she said slowly. What could possibly have inspired this sudden declaration? Color rose in Sam's tanned cheeks, but he had come too far to back down now. I've been watching you since you arrived in town, ma'am, and I hope that doesn't sound too forward. The words tumbled out faster now, honesty spilling like water from a broken dam. I saw how you handled those rowdy Miller boys when they tried to disrupt your class, how you stood your ground with patience and firmness till they settled down. I heard you reading poetry to your students one afternoon when I was passing by the schoolhouse, and the way you made those words come alive, it made me stop and listen for near an hour. He paused, gathered his courage, continued. And I saw you help old Mrs. Lynn carry her groceries last month, talking to her like she was a real person, instead of ignoring her like most folks do. You have character, Miss Ashford. Courage and principles and kindness all mixed together. And I know that a woman like you is rarer than gold in these parts. Something shifted in her expression. The walls she had built around herself, the armor of propriety and wounded pride, cracked just slightly. The thought of you getting on that train and disappearing from my life before I even tried to know you has been eating at me for days. Sam finished quietly. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I'm just asking for a chance. Stay in town. Let me call on you properly. And if after a few weeks you decide I'm not worth your time, I'll personally buy you a new ticket and drive you to the station myself. But please don't leave without giving us a possibility. The whistle blew one final time. The conductor climbed aboard, shaking his head at young people and their drama. Steam hissed. The great wheels began to turn slowly at first, then gathering momentum. In another moment, the decision would be made for her. The train would depart, and Miss Ashford would either be on it or she would not. Sam watched emotions chase across her face. Doubt, fear, hope, anger at being put in this position. Something else he could not quite name, but that made his heart lift despite everything. Eleanor Ashford stepped back from the train. Sam's breath caught in his throat. She set her trunk back on the platform with a solid thud. The train began to move slowly at first, and then gathering speed. It carried away her ticket home, her return to the life she had known, her escape from this place that had rejected her. And she stood there on the platform watching it go. When she turned to face Sam, her expression was a complex mix of determination and terror, and something that might have been relief. "You just made me miss my train, Mr. Garrett," she said, her voice shaking slightly, despite her attempt at composure. "I hope you understand the magnitude of what you've done." "Yes, ma'am, I do." Sam was still holding his hat, still barely breathing, "and I promise you won't regret it." For a long moment, they simply stood there, two people who had just crossed a threshold neither could uncross. The platform had emptied. The train was a distant speck now disappearing toward the eastern horizon. The morning stretched out around them, full of possibility and peril. "Where are you staying?" Sam asked, forcing his practical side to take over before he did something foolish like sweep her into his arms. "I know you lost your rooms at the boarding house when you lost the teaching position." The reality of her situation seemed to hit Eleanor all at once. Her face paled. I, I hadn't thought that far ahead. "Mrs. Fletcher runs a respectable boarding house on 3rd Street. She's a good woman, fair and honest. I'll take you there and pay for a month's lodging. And before you protest," he added quickly, seeing her mouth open to object, "consider it an investment in my own interests. I want you to have a safe, comfortable place to stay while I court you properly. I cannot accept such a gift from a stranger, Mr. Garrett. It would be completely inappropriate." Even as she said it, Sam saw the recognition in her eyes of how ridiculous that sounded, given that she had just agreed to let this stranger court her. "Then consider it a loan to be repaid when and if you choose." He picked up her trunk as if it weighed nothing, the muscles in his arms and shoulders flexing under his shirt. "Miss Ashford, I know this is all highly irregular, and I know you must think I'm either crazy or up to no good. But I swear on my mother's grave that my intentions are honorable. I want the chance to know you, to show you what life could be like out here with someone who values you for who you are." Eleanor took a deep breath. Sam watched her square her shoulders, lift her chin, summon the same courage that had brought her west in the first place. "Very well, Mr. Garrett, but I insist on establishing some ground rules for this arrangement. First, you will call on me no more than 3 times per week at appropriate hours and always with proper notice. Second, I will seek employment in town to support myself as I will not be dependent on your charity. And third, if at any point I decide this arrangement is not working, you will respect my decision without argument." "Agreed to all of it," Sam said immediately. He would have agreed to almost anything at that moment. She was staying. That was all that mattered. "Though I should warn you," he added as they began walking toward town, "finding employment in Hawthorne may prove difficult given how the school board treated you. Folks in small towns have long memories and stubborn prejudices." "Then I will simply have to change their minds," Eleanor said with more confidence than she felt. Sam grinned, and she noticed for the first time the small dimple that appeared in his left cheek. It made him look younger, less weather-beaten, almost boyish. "Right this way, ma'am, and Miss Ashford. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy like me. I will do everything in my power to make sure you don't regret it." Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house stood on 3rd Street, a 2-story wooden structure painted white with green shutters that had faded to a pale sage in the desert sun. Sam carried Eleanor's trunk up the front steps, acutely aware of how this must look to anyone watching. A cowboy and a lady arriving together in the middle of the morning, in a town like Hawthorne that would be fodder for gossip before the lunch hour. The door opened before they could knock. Mrs. Fletcher herself stood there, a stout woman in her 50s with sharp gray eyes that missed nothing and iron gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked between Sam and Eleanor with an expression that suggested she had seen most everything life had to offer and was not easily surprised by any of it. "Mrs. Fletcher," Sam said, removing his hat, "this is Miss Ashford. She needs lodging for a month." The older woman's eyes narrowed slightly. "I heard the school board let her go. I also heard she bought a train ticket east. Yet here she stands." "Change of plans," Eleanor said, her voice steady despite the tremor Sam could see in her hands. "I've decided to remain in Hawthorne a while longer." Mrs. Fletcher's gaze moved to Sam, then back to Eleanor. A whole conversation seemed to happen in that look, judgments made and conclusions drawn. But when she spoke, her tone was businesslike. "I have a room on the 2nd floor, faces east, so you'll get morning sun. Breakfast is at 7, dinner at 6. I don't tolerate drinking, gambling, or improper behavior under my roof. Rent is $15 for the month, including meals. Laundry is extra. Sam had already pulled out his wallet, but Eleanor stopped him with a hand on his arm. The touch was brief, barely a moment, but Sam felt it like a brand. I will pay half now from my own funds, she said firmly. Mr. Garrett may loan me the other half to be repaid as soon as I secure employment. She gave Sam a look that brooked no argument. He smiled slightly and nodded. As you wish, Miss Ashford. The transaction completed, Mrs. Fletcher showed them upstairs to a small but clean room with a narrow bed, a washstand, a desk, and a window that looked out over the street. It was simple, square, even, but it had a kind of honest plainness that Sam appreciated. He set Eleanor's trunk down carefully, then stood awkwardly near the door. The propriety of the situation had caught up with him. They were alone in her room, even with the door wide open. By Boston standards, this was probably scandalous. By Hawthorne standards, it was raising eyebrows. I should let you get settled, he said, but if it would be acceptable, I'd like to call on you tomorrow evening. Perhaps take you to dinner at the hotel restaurant. That would be acceptable, Mr. Garrett. Shall we say 6 o'clock? 6 o'clock, he confirmed. He started to leave, then turned back. Miss Ashford, I want you to know that what I said at the train station was true. I've admired you from afar for weeks now, and I never had the courage to approach you properly. When I heard you were leaving, I knew I would regret it for the rest of my life if I didn't at least try. So thank you again for giving me this chance. After he left, Sam stood on the street outside Mrs. Fletcher's for a full minute, just breathing. His hands were shaking. The enormity of what had just happened was settling over him like a physical weight. He had stopped her from boarding the train. She had stayed. And now he had to prove that her faith in him, however tentative, was not misplaced. The ride back to his ranch passed in a blur. His mind was already racing ahead, cataloging everything he needed to do. The cabin needed cleaning, really cleaning, not just the cursory tidying he did when the mess got too bad. His clothes needed proper washing. He should probably see about getting a haircut, and he needed to plan where to take her, what to show her, how to demonstrate that he was worthy of her time. But first he had cattle to check and horses to feed and 100 small tasks that made up the daily business of keeping a ranch running. The work grounded him, gave his hands something to do while his thoughts churned. Over the next 3 weeks, Sam fell into a routine that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. He visited Eleanor 3 times a week as agreed. Never more, though he wanted to see her every day. He bathed before each visit, put on his cleanest shirt, tried to tame his perpetually unruly hair. He brought her to dinner at the hotel, where the food was mediocre, but the atmosphere was as close to civilized as Hawthorne offered. They talked. Lord, how they talked. Sam discovered that Eleanor had opinions about everything from education reform to women's suffrage, to the treatment of the Chinese workers who had built the railroad and then been left to fend for themselves in towns that did not want them. She was passionate, inarticulate, and completely unafraid to challenge him when she thought he was wrong. At first, this intimidated him. Back in Missouri, women had been expected to defer to men's opinions, to nod and smile, and keep their own thoughts quiet. But Eleanor was different. She engaged with ideas like they mattered, like the conversation itself had value beyond mere politeness. Sam found himself rising to meet her. He had opinions too formed from years of hard experience, even if he lacked her formal education. They debated the merits of different approaches to land management, the ethics of water rights in the desert, the future of the cattle industry. Sometimes they agreed, often they did not. But the disagreements were respectful, stimulating even. You have a good mind, Mr. Garrett, she told him one evening after a particularly spirited discussion about whether the government should regulate grazing on public lands. Not formally trained, perhaps, but sharp and practical. And you have a good heart, Miss Ashford, he replied. Not just intelligent, but kind. Those two don't always go together. He took her on walks through the countryside around Hawthorne, teaching her to identify the desert plants. This was scrub brush, useful for nothing but burning. That was sagebrush, which the cattle would eat when nothing else was available. Here were the tracks of a coyote there, the marks of a jackrabbit. He showed her how to read the sky for weather, how to tell good water from alkali by the plants growing near it. Eleanor absorbed it all with the same fierce intelligence she brought to everything. She asked questions that made him think about things he had learned through rote experience, forcing him to articulate the why behind the how. On the third week, Sam took her to his ranch. He had debated this, worried about the impression it would make. The cabin was small and rough. The barn was functional but plain. Everything spoke of a man living alone with only the necessities. But Eleanor did not seem put off. She walked the property with him, admiring the view of the hills, the clear water of the spring, the sturdy construction of the fences he had built. She watched him work with a difficult horse, a 3-year-old gelding, that previous owners had given up on. Sam had a gift with horses, always had. It was not magic or special knowledge, just patience, and the ability to read what the animal was telling him through its body language. This gelding was scared, not mean. Someone had mistreated it, and now it flinched away from human touch. Sam worked slowly, never forcing, always giving the horse the option to approach or retreat. He talked in a low, steady voice, more for the rhythm of the sound than the words. After 2 hours, the gelding let Sam touch its neck. After 3, it was eating grain from his hand. "That was remarkable," Eleanor said softly. She had been watching from the fence rail, silent and still, so as not to spook the animal. "I've never seen anyone with that kind of patience." "With things that matter," Sam said, "a man has to be patient." He was not talking about the horse, and from the way her eyes met his, she knew it. But it was not all smooth progress. There were obstacles. The first came in the form of Trevor Sykes. Sam had known of Trevor before this, of course. Hard to miss him in a town the size of Hawthorne. He was 28, tall and well-built, with the kind of easy confidence that came from being the son of someone important. His father was the mine foreman, which meant Trevor had grown up with money and influence, and the assumption that what he wanted he could have. Their first direct encounter came on a Wednesday evening. Sam was walking Eleanor back to the boarding house after dinner. They were discussing a book she had lent him, one of her precious volumes brought from Boston. The conversation was animated, both of them caught up in the ideas. Trevor stepped out from the saloon directly into their path. The smell of whiskey came with him, though he did not seem drunk. "Just mean." Well, he said, his voice carrying across the quiet street. "The Boston princess in her cowboy protector. Quite the picture." Sam felt Eleanor stiffen beside him. He put himself slightly in front of her, a subtle shift of position. "Evening, Trevor," he said evenly. "We're just passing through." "I'll bet you are." Trevor's eyes moved to Eleanor, and there was something ugly in his expression. "You know, Miss Ashford, you could have had a real future in this town. I would have taken care of you, given you nice things. Instead, you chose to throw yourself at some dirt farmer who lives in a shack." "Mr. Sykes," Eleanor said, her voice like ice, "my choices are none of your concern. Please step aside." "Make me princess." The moment hung there, taut as a wire. Sam could feel his muscles tensing, his hands curling into fists. Violence was not his first choice, never had been. But he would not let this man intimidate Eleanor. Then a new voice cut through the tension. "Is there a problem here?" Sheriff Ben Crawford stood in the doorway of his office across the street. He was a lean man in his 50s, hard-eyed and fair-minded. He had no love for troublemakers, regardless of whose son they were. Trevor's expression soured, but he stepped back. "No problem, Sheriff. Just having a conversation with old friends." "Then I suggest you move that conversation inside, away from decent people." Trevor shot Sam a look that promised this was not over, then walked back into the saloon. The sheriff nodded to Sam and Eleanor, then returned to his office. "Thank you for not rising to his bait," Eleanor said quietly as they continued walking. Her hand found his arm, a small gesture of support that made Sam's heart lift despite the ugly encounter. "Men like that want you to fight," Sam said. "Gives them an excuse. Better to walk away when you can. And when you can't, then you do what needs doing. But only then." The second obstacle was more insidious. Eleanor began looking for work, and Sam watched her face grow tighter and more closed with each rejection. The general store did not need help. The hotel was not hiring. The newspaper office suggested that reporting was not suitable work for a woman. The assayer's office laughed at the very idea. Every door closed politely but firmly. Sam knew what was happening. Word had spread about the school board's decision. People who might have hired Eleanor were afraid of offending the mine interests. Others genuinely believed she had overstepped her place as a woman, and some were simply taking their cues from Trevor's public disdain. It aided Sam to watch her struggle. His instinct was to fix it, to throw money at the problem, or use what little influence he had. But he knew Eleanor well enough by now to understand that she needed to solve this herself. Her independence was not a quirk or an affectation. It was fundamental to who she was. The solution when it came was unexpected. Sam was in town buying supplies when he saw Eleanor talking with Mrs. Lin, the elderly Chinese woman who lived in a small house on the edge of town. Mrs. Lin's husband had worked on the Transcontinental Railroad and stayed in Nevada when the work was done. He had died 2 years back, leaving her alone in a place that barely acknowledged her existence. Eleanor had been kind to Mrs. Lin from the beginning, helping her carry groceries, speaking to her with respect. Now the two women stood together on the street, Mrs. Lin talking rapidly in her accented English, gesturing with her hands. Sam drifted closer, curious but not wanting to intrude. "You need job, yes," Mrs. Lin was saying. "I hear you looking. My daughter, she run laundry business. Very successful. She needs someone who can read, write, keep books in English. Chinese customers, no problem. But American customers want someone who speak perfect English. You come, I introduce you." Eleanor's face transformed. Hope, bright and sudden, replaced the weary frustration she had been carrying. "Mrs. Lin, that would be wonderful. Thank you." The laundry was a large building on the edge of town with great vats of boiling water and lines of washing hanging to dry in the desert sun. Mrs. Lin's daughter Rose was a capable-looking woman in her 30s who spoke excellent English and ran her business with impressive efficiency. She interviewed Eleanor right there, asking pointed questions about bookkeeping and business correspondence. Eleanor answered each one with confidence, demonstrating knowledge that came from managing her father's household accounts back in Boston. "I can pay you $20 a month," Rose said after 15 minutes. "To manage the accounts, handle correspondence with customers, and help with the English-speaking clients. The work is not glamorous, but it is honest and steady. Are you interested?" "I am very interested," Eleanor said, relief flooding through her voice. "When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow morning if you are available. I can show you the books and explain the system." When Eleanor told Sam the news that evening, her eyes were bright with something he had not seen since the train station. Purpose, the knowledge that she could take care of herself, that she had value in this place. "Rose Lin is a remarkable woman," she said as they sat on the porch of the boarding house, careful to maintain the propriety of distance, even as their voices dropped to intimate tones. "She built that business from nothing, same as you built your ranch. People respect her because she does good work and keeps her word. And now they'll have to respect you for the same reasons," Sam said. December arrived with its sharp winds and brief cold snaps. Sam and Eleanor had been courting for nearly 6 weeks, and Sam felt the shift between them like a physical thing. The conversations had grown deeper, more personal. The silences were comfortable instead of awkward. When their hands accidentally brushed, neither pulled away immediately. Sam found himself thinking about marriage. Not in some distant theoretical way, but as a real possibility. Eleanor had taken to frontier life better than he had dared hope. She did not complain about the dust or the cold or the roughness of everything. She saw the beauty in the landscape, the potential in the raw spaces. And God help him, he was in love with her. Completely, irrevocably in love, in a way that made his father's grief over his mother suddenly make terrible sense. On a cold evening in mid-December, Sam brought Eleanor to his ranch for supper. He had spent the previous day cleaning the cabin until it shone such as a one-room log building could shine. He had cooked a stew, simple but hearty, and baked bread that only burned a little around the edges. They sat at a small table eating by lamplight and talked about their childhoods. Eleanor described growing up in Boston with servants and society balls and expectations that felt like chains. Sam described Missouri and farm work and parents who had loved each other with an intensity that left no room for their son when one of them was gone. "I swore I would never be like my father." Sam said the words coming out before he could stop them. "Never let another person have that kind of power over me. Never care so much that losing them would break me." "And now?" Eleanor asked softly. Sam looked at her across the table, at her auburn hair, catching the lamplight, at her hazel eyes, watching him with an expression he could not quite name. "Now I think maybe my father understood something I didn't. Maybe some people are worth the risk." The words hung there between them, heavy with meaning. Eleanor's breath caught just slightly, but Sam heard it. "Sam," she said, and it was the first time she had used his given name. "I need to tell you something." "All right. When I came west, I was running from the life my family had planned for me. There was a man, Richard Hartford. My father wanted me to marry him. He was wealthy, respected everything a good match should be. But being with him felt like slowly suffocating, like becoming a pretty ornament in someone else's house. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I came to Nevada to prove I did not need a man to complete my life, to show that I could build something on my own terms. And then I met you, and you asked me to give you a chance, and I said yes. But Sam, I am terrified. Why? Because falling in love feels like giving up on that dream, like admitting I was wrong all along, that I do need someone else to be complete. Sam reached across the table, his calloused hand covering her smaller ink-stained one from Ellie, he said, using the name he had heard her sister call her in a letter she had shown him. Loving me does not mean giving up your independence. It means having a partner who supports it. If we build a life together, it would be our life, not mine with you as an accessory. Do you understand the difference? I want to, she whispered. I want to believe that is possible. Then let me prove it to you. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, a gentle, unconscious gesture. Keep working at the laundry if it makes you happy. Keep your own money. Make your own choices. I am asking is that you let me love you while you do it. Eleanor looked down at their joined hands, his large and rough, hers smaller, but no less capable. When she looked up, there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. Yes, she said. Yes, I will give us more time. The kiss, when it came, was inevitable. Sam stood, pulled her gently to her feet, and cupped her face in his hands. He gave her every opportunity to pull away, to say no, to change her mind. Instead, she leaned into him, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. The kiss was soft at first, questioning. Then Eleanor kissed him back, and Sam felt something inside him settle into place. This was right. This was what he had been missing in all those lonely years on the ranch. Not just physical touch, but connection, understanding, partnership. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sam rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Eleanor Ashford, he said. I have loved you since I heard you reading poetry to those children, and I will love you until the day I die. I love you too, Samuel Garrett, she replied, and that terrifies and exhilarates me in equal measure. Christmas came to Nevada with unseasonable warmth. Sam gave Eleanor a leather journal with her initials embossed on the cover. For your thoughts and dreams, he said. You are always talking about wanting to write about your experiences out west. I thought you might like a proper place to keep those stories. She gave him a wool scarf she had knitted in secret over the past few weeks, working on it in her room at night after dinner. For those cold mornings when you are out checking on your cattle, she said, wrapping it around his neck with a tenderness that made his throat tight. I do not want you catching a chill. They spent Christmas Day at the ranch. Eleanor helped Sam prepare a turkey dinner, laughing at her own inadequate cooking skills. She had never learned properly in Boston, where her family had servants to handle such tasks. Sam was patient and amused by her disasters, and together they managed to produce a meal that was at least edible. As they sat at his small table, full and content, Sam broached a subject that had been weighing on his mind. When I was planning this courtship, he said carefully, I did not think about all the practical details. If we were to marry, and I am not presuming, just asking, would you want to learn to cook? Or would you prefer to hire someone to help with household tasks? The casual mention of marriage made Eleanor's heart skip, but she tried to answer seriously. I think I would like to learn at least the basics. I do not want to be completely dependent on hired help. But I also do not think I have much natural talent for domestic arts. That is fine by me. I did not fall in love with you for your cooking skills. Sam reached across the table and took her hand. Ellie, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think about it carefully before you answer. She braced herself, sensing something important was coming. My ranch is doing well, better than I expected for this time of year. I have managed to save a considerable amount, and I am planning to expand next spring. Maybe buy some more breeding stock, hire a few hands to help with the work. It is going to be a busy time, and I would really like to have you by my side for it. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I know we said we would take our time, and I am not trying to rush you. But I have to ask, do you see a future here with me? Or are you still thinking about going back to Boston eventually? Eleanor looked around the cabin, at the simple furniture Sam had built, at the stone fireplace, where a cheerful fire crackled, at the windows that looked out over the beautiful, harsh landscape. She thought about her job at the laundry, about Rose's friendship and respect. She thought about the life she had left behind in Boston, the suffocating expectations and endless rules. "I do not want to go back to Boston," she said slowly. "I think I have known that for a while now, but I was afraid to admit it. My family is there, and I suppose I will always love them in a way, but that is not my home anymore, if it ever really was." "And could this be your home?" Sam's voice was quiet, vulnerable in a way she had never heard from him before. "Could I be your home?" Eleanor stood up and walked around the table to where he sat. She cupped his face in her hands, looking into those gray eyes that had become so dear to her. "Samuel Garrett, I think you already are." He pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling safe and wanted in a way she never had before. They sat like that for a long time, watching the fire burn down to embers, neither needing to speak. The peace could not last. In January, a letter arrived from Eleanor's mother. Sam watched her face as she read it, saw the color drain from her cheeks, saw her hands begin to shake. "What is it?" he asked gently. She handed him the letter. It was full of recriminations and demands. Why had Eleanor not returned as planned? What was she doing in that godless frontier town? She must come home immediately. People were talking. Her reputation was being damaged beyond repair. The words were sharp and cutting, designed to inflict maximum guilt. Sam felt anger rise in his chest on Eleanor's behalf. "Are you going to tell them about us?" he asked, handing the letter back. "I have to. I cannot keep hiding this." She paced the floor of the boarding house parlor, agitated. "But Sam, my mother will have hysterics when she learns I am being courted by a rancher. My father will probably disown me, and my sisters will think I have lost my mind." "Have you," Sam asked gently, "lost your mind, I mean?" Eleanor stopped pacing and looked at him. "Probably. By Boston standards, I am throwing away everything for a man I have known for 2 months. But Sam, I do not care what Boston thinks anymore. This is my life, my choice, and I am choosing you. I am choosing us." "Then tell them, Mom," he said. "Write to them honestly. Tell them you have found something worth staying for and that you are happy. If they love you, truly love you, they will come to accept it eventually." Eleanor spent hours crafting her response, trying to find the right words to explain her decision without causing too much hurt or worry. She told her parents about Sam, about his ranch, about how he treated her with respect and kindness. She told them about her job at the laundry, about her growing love for the Nevada territory despite its harshness. And she told them as gently as possible that she was not coming home because she had already found her home and it was not in Boston. But the letter troubles were minor compared to what came next. Late January brought the harsh winter Sam had been dreading. An unusual cold snap settled over Nevada, bringing heavy snow that was rare for the desert. Temperatures dropped below zero. The cattle, unprepared for such extreme cold, began to struggle. Sam worked 18 20-hour days trying to save his herd, breaking ice at the water sources, moving hay to areas where the cattle could not reach the grass, checking for signs of hypothermia and frostbite. The physical labor was brutal, made worse by the cold that cut through every layer of clothing. Eleanor insisted on helping despite his protests. "I am not sitting idle in town while you work yourself to death," she said firmly, showing up at the ranch in borrowed men's clothes, her face set with determination. They worked side by side. Sam handled the heavy physical labor while Eleanor managed logistics, keeping track of which areas had been covered, which cattle had been fed, how much hay remained. She also kept the cabin warm and prepared hot food and coffee, small comforts that made the grueling work bearable. Together they saved most of the herd, not all. Sam lost about 50 head, 15% of his cattle to the cold and exposure. It hurt both financially and emotionally. Each dead animal represented money lost, yes, but also a kind of failure. But it could have been so much worse. Without Eleanor's help, without her organizational skills, and her willingness to work through exhaustion, the losses would have been catastrophic. On the 12th day of the crisis, Sam collapsed. He had been checking the far pasture, breaking ice at a stock tank, when his legs simply gave out. He remembered the world tilting, the snow rushing up to meet him, then nothing. When he woke, he was in his bed in the cabin. Eleanor sat beside him, her face drawn with worry. Her hand felt cool against his forehead, which burned with fever. How long? He managed to croak. 2 days. You have pneumonia. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the fear underneath. The doctor was here yesterday. He left medicine and instructions. Over the next week, Sam drifted in and out of delirium. In his fevered state, he relived memories. His mother's death, his father's grief, the train station. Eleanor's face as she stepped down from the train. In his lucid moments, he was aware of Eleanor's constant presence. She bathed his face with cool water. She made him drink broth and take the bitter medicine. She talked to him in a low, soothing voice, telling him about her day, about the ranch, about anything and everything. And in his delirium, the careful walls he had built around his deepest feelings crumbled. He told her things he had never planned to say, at least not yet. How much he loved her. How she had brought color and meaning to a life that had been only black and white before. How the thought of losing her was unbearable. When the fever finally broke on the seventh day, Sam woke to find Eleanor asleep in the chair beside his bed. She looked exhausted, her face pale, dark circles under her eyes. She had clearly been there for days, barely sleeping, focused entirely on his care. Something shifted in Sam's chest. She could have gone back to town, could have hired someone to nurse him. Instead, she had stayed propriety be damned and fought for his life with the same fierce determination she brought to everything. "Ellie," he whispered. Her eyes opened immediately. Relief flooded her face. "You are back, really back. I was so worried." "How long have you been here?" "Since I found you in the snow, 10 days now." "Your job, your reputation." "To hell with my reputation," she said fiercely. "And Rose understands. Sam, I thought I was going to lose you. Nothing else mattered compared to that." He reached for her hand, his grip weak but determined. "I love you, Eleanor Ashford, and I am sorry it took nearly dying to say it when I was conscious enough to mean it." She laughed, a sound that was half sob. "I love you too, you stubborn fool. And if you ever scare me like that again, I will kill you myself." The winter crisis had one more consequence. When spring came and the snow melted, Sam discovered a new problem. Hank Blackwood, who owned the neighboring ranch, had claimed that Sam's spring was actually on Blackwood land. "Got a new survey done," Blackwood announced when he rode over in March. "Shows the boundary is a quarter-mile east of where we thought. That puts your water source on my property." Sam felt his stomach drop. Without that spring, his ranch was worthless. The cattle could not survive on what little water remained within his actual boundaries. "That survey is wrong," Sam said, keeping his voice level. "I have the original deed and map. The spring is mine. Then I guess we will let the courts decide. My lawyer will be in touch." After Blackwood left, Sam stared at the paper the man had given him. A lawsuit, legal fees he could not afford, the possibility of losing everything he had built. Eleanor found him sitting on his porch that evening, the notice in his hands. "What is wrong?" she asked, her voice sharp with concern. He showed her the paper, watched her read it, her expression growing dark. "This is Trevor's doing," she said flatly. "Blackwood is his uncle. They are trying to destroy you because of me. We do not know that for certain." "Do not we?" She paced, her mind clearly racing. "Sam, how much would a lawyer cost?" "More than I have. I would need to sell part of the herd to afford it. And there is no guarantee of winning." Eleanor went still, her face taking on the determined look Sam had learned meant she was formulating a plan. "May I see your original land deed and survey?" Over the next week, Eleanor disappeared into the county courthouse during her lunch breaks from the laundry. Sam did not ask what she was doing, trusting that she had her reasons. On Saturday, she appeared at his ranch with a triumphant smile and a folder full of papers. "I found them," she said. "The original surveyor's notes from 1871, before either you or Blackwood bought land. They clearly show the spring on your property. The new survey Blackwood commissioned used incorrect reference points." She had done more than find the notes. She had written a legal brief citing precedents in territorial law, making a clear case for why Sam's claim was valid. It was impressive work, the kind a trained lawyer might produce. Sam stared at the documents, then at Eleanor. "You did this?" "I told you I was educated. My father made sure all his daughters understood business and law even if we were never expected to use it." She smiled. "Turns out that education is rather useful after all." Sam pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that made her gasp. "You just saved my ranch, Ellie." "Our ranch." "Our ranch," she repeated, testing the words. then smiled. Yes, I like the sound of that. But Sheriff Crawford, presented with Eleanor's evidence, ruled in Sam's favor. Blackwood's claim was dismissed. The spring was confirmed as Sam's property. Trevor confronted Sam in town the next day, his face twisted with rage. You think you have won, Garrett. You think some fancy paperwork changes anything. I think the law is clear, Sam said calmly. The spring is mine. And if you or your uncle try this again, I will have the sheriff on you for harassment. Trevor stepped closer, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. This is not over. Not by a long shot. You have taken something that should have been mine. I will make you pay for that. Sam met his eyes steadily. If you have a problem with me, we can settle it man to man. But if you go near Eleanor again, if you so much as speak to her, I will end you. Are we clear? For a moment, it seemed Trevor might throw a punch right there in the middle of the street. Then he turned and stalked away. But Sam knew the threat was real. Men like Trevor did not let go of grudges. They nursed them, fed them, waited for the right moment to strike. That moment came in late March on a quiet evening when Eleanor was closing up the laundry. She had stayed late to finish the month's accounts. It was dark when she finally locked the door and started walking toward the boarding house. The street was mostly empty, most people already home for supper. Trevor stepped out of an alley blocking her path. Going somewhere, princess, Eleanor's heart jumped into her throat, but she kept her voice steady. Mr. Sykes, please step aside. I do not think so. You and I need to have a conversation. He moved closer. Eleanor could smell whiskey on his breath, see the rage simmering in his eyes. You think you are too good for me. Think that cowboy of yours is better than what I could give you. I think you need to leave me alone. Trevor grabbed her arm, his fingers digging in painfully. Nobody rejects me. Nobody makes me look like a fool in my own town. He pushed her back toward the alley wall. Eleanor opened her mouth to scream, but his hand clamped over it. Not so high and mighty now, are you? Eleanor fought, kicking and twisting, but Trevor was larger and stronger. Panic surged through her. This was not just intimidation. This was real danger. Then Trevor was suddenly yanked backward, torn away from her with violent force. Sam had appeared from nowhere, his face a mask of cold fury. He spun Trevor around and hit him a solid punch to the jaw that snapped the other man's head back. Trevor staggered, tried to swing back, but Sam was faster, angrier, more focused. The fight was brief and brutal. Sam's ranch work had made him strong, and his rage made him relentless. 3 punches delivered with precision and power, and Trevor was on the ground, blood streaming from his nose. I warned you, Sam said, his voice deadly quiet. I told you what would happen if you touched her. Trevor tried to get up. Sam put a boot on his chest, pressing him down. You are going to leave town, Trevor, tonight, because if I see you near Eleanor again, if you so much as look at her, I will not stop at a beating. Do you understand me? Sheriff Crawford appeared then, drawn by the commotion. He took in the scene, Trevor on the ground, bleeding, Sam standing over him. Eleanor pressed against the wall, looking shaken but unhurt. What happened here? Trevor attacked Miss Ashford, Sam said, his voice still hard. I intervened. The sheriff looked at Eleanor. Miss Ashford, is that accurate? Yes, she managed, her voice shaking despite her efforts to control it. He grabbed me, pushed me against the wall. If Sam had not arrived when he did, she did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Crawford hauled Trevor to his feet. You are under arrest for assault. And Trevor, your father's influence does not extend to protecting you from this. You attacked a woman. That does not stand in my town. As the sheriff led Trevor away, Sam turned to Eleanor. She was trembling now that the immediate danger had passed, her face pale in the dim light. Are you hurt? He asked gently. No, shaken but not hurt. She looked up at him, tears beginning to spill down her cheeks. Sam, if you had not been there, if you had not come when you did. He pulled her into his arms, holding her close while she cried. I was coming to walk you home. I do it every night you work late. Did you know that I wait at the hotel watch to make sure you get back safely? I did not know. I will always be there, Ellie. I will always protect you. I swear it. The attack had consequences beyond Trevor's arrest. It crystallized something in both Sam and Eleanor, forced them to confront what they had been dancing around for months. That night, standing on the porch of Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house, Sam took Eleanor's hands in his. I cannot wait anymore, he said. I know we agreed to take things slow, but Ellie, I need to ask, will you marry me? The words hung there simple and direct. No grand speech, no elaborate planning, just the raw honesty of a man who nearly lost the woman he loved and could not bear the uncertainty any longer. Eleanor looked at him, this cowboy who had stopped her from boarding a train 4 months ago, who had courted her with patience and respect, who had just fought for her without hesitation. Yes, she said. Yes, Sam, I will marry you. He kissed her, then there on the porch, with half of Hawthorne, potentially watching, kissed her with all the pent-up emotion of months of careful courtship. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Eleanor Ashford, and I promise you our marriage will be a partnership. Your dreams are as important as mine. If you want to keep working at the laundry, you can. If you want to start teaching again, we will build a school. Whatever you need to be happy and fulfilled, I will support it. I know, she said softly. That is why I said yes. They were married 6 weeks later in early May of 1877 in a simple ceremony at the community church in Hawthorne. Rosalind stood up with Eleanor as her witness. Jack Morrison, Sam's rancher friend and occasional business partner, stood up for him. Mrs. Fletcher cried happy tears. Several of Eleanor's former students attended with their parents. Even Sheriff Crawford came pleased to see something good come out of the trouble with Trevor. Eleanor wore a simple white dress that Rose had helped her alter from a gown she had brought from Boston. Sam wore his best suit borrowed from Jack, looking handsome and nervous in equal measure. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Sam kissed her in front of the whole congregation, Eleanor felt a sense of rightness she had never experienced before. This was not giving up her independence. This was choosing to share her life with someone who valued that independence, who wanted her to be fully herself. The reception was held at the hotel, modest but cheerful. There was cake and dancing. Mrs. Lynn brought special dumplings she had made. Several of Sam's fellow ranchers came with their wives to celebrate. When Sam and Eleanor danced together, she in her white dress and he in his borrowed suit, both of them slightly clumsy but happy, Sam whispered in her ear, "Thank you for not getting on that train. Thank you for asking me to stay." That night, Sam carried Eleanor over the threshold of the ranch house that would now be their home. He had been working on it in secret for weeks, adding a second room building, new furniture, making it a proper home for a married couple. "Welcome home, Mrs. Garrett," he said, setting her down gently. "Mrs. Garrett," Eleanor repeated, testing out the name. It sounded strange but good, like putting on a new coat that fit surprisingly well. "I like the sound of that." Their wedding night was tender and gentle, Sam taking care to make sure she was comfortable and happy. Eleanor had been nervous about this aspect of marriage, having heard various conflicting information from married friends back in Boston. But Sam was patient and loving, and she discovered that physical intimacy with someone you truly loved was nothing to fear. The next morning, waking up in Sam's arms with the sun streaming through the window, Eleanor thought about how much her life had changed in 6 months. She had gone from a failed school teacher, planning to return home in defeat, to a married woman with a home and a husband she loved. The months that followed were a period of adjustment and growth. Eleanor continued working at the laundry for a while, wanting to keep her financial independence, even as a married woman. Sam supported this, proud of her work ethic and capability. She learned ranch life gradually, how to help with branding in the spring roundup, how to keep the ranch accounts and manage supplies, how to ride well enough to help move cattle when needed. She was not a natural cowgirl, but she was competent and willing to learn. Sam was true to his word about their marriage being a partnership. He consulted her on major decisions about the ranch. He valued her input on business matters. He never tried to limit her activities or interests. In September, Eleanor realized she was pregnant. The morning sickness started first, then the fatigue. A visit to doctor. Hayes confirmed her suspicions. Baby due in March, the doctor estimated. She told Sam one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. "I am going to have a baby, probably in early March, the doctor thinks." Sam's face went through a series of emotions. Shock, joy, fear, and then pure happiness. "We are going to be parents. Ellie, that is the best news I have ever received." "You are not worried?" she asked. She had been anxious about telling him, afraid he might think it was too soon. "Of course I am worried. I am terrified," he admitted. "But I am also thrilled. We are going to have a child, Ellie, a little person who is half you and half me. How could I be anything but happy about that? The pregnancy was difficult at times. Eleanor had severe morning sickness for the first few months. As she grew larger, she found it hard to manage her usual activities. She had to close her small school temporarily, much to her disappointment. Sam was endlessly patient and supportive. He took over most of the household chores without complaint. He brought her tea and crackers when the nausea was bad. He held her at night when she worried about whether she would be a good mother. In late February, a cold snap brought unusual snow to the Nevada desert. Eleanor watched the white flakes fall from the warmth of their cabin, one hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick and roll inside her. Any day now, the doctor had said during his last visit, any day now, everything will change again. The baby came in the early morning hours of March 3rd, 1878, after a long and exhausting labor. Rose came to help, having more experience with childbirth than Sam. Between her capable hands and Sam's anxious presence, Eleanor managed to bring a healthy baby boy into the world. "He is perfect," Sam whispered, holding his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "Ellie, he is absolutely perfect." They named him William Samuel Garrett. William after Sam's father, Samuel, for his own name carried forward. He had dark hair like Sam and Eleanor's hazel eyes. And from the moment he was born, he had his father wrapped completely around his tiny finger. Adjusting to life with a baby was harder than either Sam or Eleanor had anticipated. William was a fussy infant, crying at odd hours and demanding constant attention. Eleanor was exhausted and overwhelmed, struggling to balance motherhood with everything else she wanted to do. There were days when she cried from frustration and fatigue, wondering if she had been wrong to think she could have both a family and her other pursuits. But Sam was there through all of it, changing diapers when most men of the era would have considered it beneath them, walking the floor with William when he would not sleep, taking the baby so Eleanor could rest. He reminded her constantly that they were in this together, that she did not have to do everything herself. As William grew from an infant into a chubby, cheerful toddler, life settled into a new normal. Eleanor reopened her small school when Will was 6 months old, bringing him with her and teaching while he played on a blanket in the corner. Her students were delighted to have a baby to dote on, and the older girls often helped watch him during lessons. The ranch continued to prosper. Sam's careful management and good instincts about cattle breeding paid off. By 1880, they were able to expand their operations significantly, buying more land adjacent to their original property and hiring additional hands to help with the work. Eleanor managed the business seas, keeping books, handling correspondence with buyers, and negotiating contracts. Together, they built something solid and lasting. In the fall of 1879, Eleanor received a surprising letter from her mother. It was not warm or effusive, but it was civil, asking about her life and her child and expressing a desire to possibly visit Nevada and meet her grandson. It was not a full reconciliation, but it was a start. Eleanor wrote back immediately, extending an invitation for the following spring when travel would be easier and the weather more hospitable. Her parents came in May of 1880, arriving in a hired carriage looking dusty and uncomfortable after the long journey. Eleanor's father was grayer than she remembered, her mother more worn. They looked around at the ranch with obvious skepticism, their Boston sensibilities recoiling from the rawness of everything. Sam braced himself for criticism and judgment. He was acutely aware of the differences between his world and theirs. The cabin, though expanded and improved, was still modest by their standards. The work was physical and dirty. The landscape was harsh and unforgiving. But something changed when they met William. The little boy, now 2 years old and full of energy and charm, climbed into his grandfather's lap without hesitation, babbling about horses and cattle in his limited vocabulary. Eleanor's father, who had maintained a stern expression since arriving, softened visibly. His hands, accustomed to holding pens and ledgers, awkwardly but tenderly steadied his grandson. Eleanor's mother actually smiled when William insisted on showing her the chickens, pulling her by the hand with the unself-conscious confidence of a child who knows he is loved. Over the week they stayed, some watched Eleanor's parents slowly come to understand her life. Her father talked with Sam about ranching and business, clearly impressed by the younger man's intelligence and work ethic despite his lack of formal education. He asked pointed questions about cattle prices, water management, land values, and nodded thoughtfully at Sam's answers. Her mother helped Eleanor with household tasks and got to know Rose Lynn, and Mrs. Lynn, surprised to find that Eleanor had built real friendships in this frontier town. She saw how the community respected her daughter, not for her family name or Boston connections, but for her own merits. On their last evening, Eleanor's mother took her aside on the porch while Sam played with William in the yard. "I will not pretend I understand your choices," she said carefully, her voice carrying the clipped tones of New England, but something softer underneath. "This life is so different from what we wanted for you, what we thought you should want. But I can see that you are happy, truly happy in a way you never were in Boston. And your husband clearly adores you and treats you well. That is more than many women can say about their marriages, even in our social circles." "Thank you, Mother," Eleanor said, tears welling in her eyes. "That means more to me than you know." Her mother continued, "You were always headstrong and independent, even as a little girl. You wanted to do things your own way. I thought the West would break that spirit, make you realize you needed to come home. But instead you found a place that let you be exactly who you are. I suppose I should be proud of that, even if it took me too long to say so." "I hope you can be quiet," Eleanor said softly. "I know I disappointed you by not following the path you laid out for me, but I needed to find my own path. And I did. I found it with Sam here in Nevada." When her parents left, the parting was emotional but hopeful. Her father pressed money into Sam's hand for William's future education despite Sam's protests. Her mother hugged Eleanor tightly, whispering that she loved her and was proud of her, even if it had taken her too long to say so. After they had gone, Sam found Eleanor sitting on their bed, holding the money her father had given them, and crying quietly. "What is wrong?" he asked, sitting beside her and pulling her close. "Nothing is wrong. These are happy tears. I did not think they would ever accept this except us." "But they saw it, Sam. They saw that we are happy, that we have built something real." "Your father is a wise man," Sam said. "He recognized that his daughter married well, even if the man she married does not have a Harvard degree." Eleanor laughed through her tears. "You are worth 10 Harvard men, Samuel Garrett." In 1881, Eleanor had their second child, a daughter they named Margaret after Sam's mother. She was an easier baby than William had been, calm and content, where he had been fussy and demanding. She had Sam's gray eyes and a sunny disposition that made everyone who met her smile. William, now 3, was fascinated by his little sister. He wanted to help with everything, constantly bringing her toys and blankets, watching over her with the serious protectiveness of an older brother. The ranch continued to grow. Sam's reputation for breeding quality cattle spread throughout Nevada and into California. Buyers came from as far as San Francisco to purchase his stock. The business was becoming more than just a living. It was becoming a legacy. Eleanor's school had grown as well, adding more students as word spread about the quality of education she provided. Some families traveled from as far as 20 miles away to bring their children to her lessons. By 1882, she had 15 students of varying ages, and the small schoolhouse Sam had built was becoming cramped. She eventually had to hire an assistant teacher, a young woman from Reno named Sarah Thompson, who shared Eleanor's passion for education and progressive ideas about what children should learn. In 1883, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant again. This one was a surprise. She had thought at 29 that they were done having children. But Robert, called Bobby from the start, was born that fall, a calm and observant baby who seemed to take everything in with wide, serious eyes. With 3 children, the dynamics of the household shifted again. William, at 5, was already showing signs of the man he would become. Serious and thoughtful, he loved books as much as his mother and ranching as much as his father. He would follow Sam around the property, asking endless questions, absorbing everything. Margaret, at 2, was adventurous and fearless, constantly getting into scrapes and asking impossible questions. She had no interest in the quiet pursuits her mother tried to interest her in. She wanted to be outside, exploring, discovering. Bobby was too young yet to show his personality fully, but even as an infant, there was a watchfulness about him that suggested a different temperament from his siblings. Sam marveled at how 3 children from the same parents could be so distinct. It reminded him that people were not simply the product of their circumstances, but carried something unique within themselves from the start. In 1887, Nevada officially became a state, graduating from territorial status. Hawthorne held a huge celebration, and the Garrett family attended with their 3 children. Sam and Eleanor stood in the crowd listening to speeches about progress and civilization and the bright future ahead, and felt proud to be part of this growing state. Eleanor reflected on the 11 years since she had stood on that train platform, defeated and ready to give up. The woman she had been then seemed like a stranger, that Eleanor had been lost, unsure of her place in the world. This Eleanor knew exactly who she was and what she had built. As the children grew older, their distinct paths became clearer. William, by the time he was 10 in 1888, had announced that he wanted to be a rancher, like his father. He had a natural feel for the work, an intuitive understanding of cattle and horses that even Sam had to work to develop. The boy could read weather signs, track strays, and handle difficult animals with a patience beyond his years. Sam worked with him daily, teaching him everything he knew, watching with pride as his son absorbed the lessons and began to apply them independently. Margaret at 7 declared that she wanted to be a doctor. This raised eyebrows throughout Hawthorne. Girls did not become doctors. Women had their place, and it was not in medicine. But Eleanor supported her daughter wholeheartedly, and after some initial hesitation, so did Sam. He remembered how he had supported Eleanor's independence, how he had promised that their marriage would be a partnership where both their dreams mattered. How could he offer less to his daughter Bobby, at 5, was still young, but already showing a different bent? He was not interested in ranching or medicine. He loved listening to his mother read, loved the sound of words and the structure of arguments. When disputes arose among the ranch hands, Bobby would watch with fascination as Sam or Eleanor mediated, absorbing the logic of negotiation and compromise. The ranch prospered through the late 1880s and into the 1890s. By 1890, Sam had 1,200 head of cattle and 800 acres. He employed 6 ranch hands year-round, more during busy seasons. The operation that had started with one man and a dream had become one of the most successful ranches in the county. But success brought its own challenges. In 1890, Sam developed chronic back problems from decades of physical labor. The pain was not debilitating, but it was constant, a reminder that his body was aging even as his mind remained sharp. He was 39, not old by most measures, but ranch work aged a man faster than other pursuits. The countless hours in the saddle, the heavy lifting, the falls and injuries accumulated over years, all took their toll. William, now 12, began taking on more responsibility. Sam watched his son handle tasks that he himself had struggled with at twice that age and felt the strange mix of pride and melancholy that comes from watching your children surpass you. That same year brought sad news from Boston. Eleanor's father had died of a heart attack. She and Sam traveled east for the funeral, bringing the children with them. It was Eleanor's first time back in 16 years. Boston seemed both familiar and foreign. The streets were the same, but she was not. She moved through her childhood home like a ghost, touching furniture and books that had once been her whole world, but now felt like relics from someone else's life. The funeral was a grand affair befitting a prominent banker. Eleanor stood beside her mother and sisters, accepting condolences from people who had once been her social circle and now seemed like strangers. Her mother at 72 was frail but composed. She held Eleanor's hand during the service, and Eleanor realized with a pang that their time together was limited. She was grateful they had reconciled when they did. After the funeral, the family gathered at the house. Eleanor's sisters, both married to suitable Boston men, looked at her with a mix of curiosity and pity. They had heard about her life in Nevada, but seeing her in person, seeing her confidence, and the way Sam stood beside her as an equal partner seemed to confuse them. One sister, the youngest, pulled Eleanor aside. "Are you truly happy?" she asked, "living out there in the wilderness so far from civilization?" Eleanor smiled. "Nevada is not a wilderness. It is home. And yes, I am truly happy, happier than I ever was here." Her sister looked at Sam, who was talking with some of the Boston relatives, holding his own in conversation despite the vast differences in their backgrounds. "He loves you," the sister said softly. "Anyone can see that. And you love him. I suppose that is worth more than all the drawing rooms and dinner parties in Boston." "It is," Eleanor agreed. "It truly is." They returned to Nevada a week later, and Eleanor felt a sense of relief as the train carried them west, away from the past and back to the life she had chosen. The 1890s brought continued growth and change. Eleanor, now in her late 30s and early 40s, had time to pursue interests beyond immediate family needs. She began writing in earnest, using the journal Sam had given her all those years ago. Her first articles, essays about education and frontier life, were published in regional newspapers. She wrote about the challenges of teaching in a one-room schoolhouse, about the resilience of pioneer families, about the beauty of the desert that most Easterners never saw. The pay was modest, but the satisfaction was immense. She was contributing to the larger conversation about the West, adding her voice to the narrative. In 1895, after 2 years of work, Eleanor published a memoir. She called it From Boston to the Range, A Woman's Journey West. It told her story from the train platform in 1876 to the present, describing her courtship with Sam, the building of the ranch, the challenges and rewards of frontier life. The book had modest success, selling about 2,000 copies. But the letters she received from readers meant more than any sales figures. Women from all over the country wrote to thank her for her honesty, for showing them that there were other paths besides the ones society laid out. Young women contemplating their own moves west wrote asking for advice. Eleanor answered every letter, encouraging them to be brave, to trust themselves, to build lives that reflected their own values rather than others' expectations. Sam was proud of his wife's literary success, though he teased her gently about being married to a famous author. "You are not married to a famous author," Eleanor corrected. "You are married to a woman who wrote one moderately successful book." "Still more famous than me," Sam said, pulling her close. "And I am perfectly content to be Mr. Eleanor Garrett if that is what it takes." As the children entered their teenage years, their paths diverged further. William, at 17 in 1895, was already managing the daily operations of the ranch under Sam's guidance. He had his father's instincts and his mother's organizational skills. Sam trusted him with decisions that would have seemed impossible to delegate to someone so young, but William had earned that trust through demonstrated competence. Margaret, at 14 in 1895, had not wavered from her determination to become a doctor. She studied with a fierce intensity, reading every medical text she could acquire, asking Dr. Hayes endless questions whenever he came to treat someone in the family or on the ranch. In 1896, at 15, Margaret received acceptance to the Women's Medical College of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. She was one of only a handful of women in the entire country pursuing medical education, facing prejudice and skepticism at every turn. The tuition was expensive, $800 a year. Sam sold 100 head of cattle to cover it, money that could have been used to expand the ranch further or save for lean times. Eleanor asked him once if he regretted the expense. "Not for a moment," Sam said firmly. "That money is buying our daughter the chance to be who she wants to be. What better use could we possibly make of it?" Margaret left for Philadelphia in the fall of 1896. The parting was wrenching. She was only 15, traveling alone across the country to a city where she knew no one. But she was determined, and Sam and Eleanor had raised their children to pursue their dreams, even when those dreams were difficult. Over the next 4 years, letters arrived regularly from Philadelphia. Margaret wrote about the challenges she faced: the male students who resented her presence, the professors who doubted her abilities. But she also wrote about the thrill of learning, of understanding how the human body worked, of the first time she successfully diagnosed a patient. Sam read every letter multiple times, his pride in his daughter growing with each account of her perseverance. Bobby, meanwhile, revealed his own path. By the time he was 17 in 1900, it was clear he had no interest in ranching. He loved books, debate, the structure of legal arguments. He wanted to study law. Sam had initially been puzzled by this. He had expected all his sons to follow him into ranching, to carry on the legacy he had built. But Eleanor helped him understand that Bobby had his own gifts, gifts that would be wasted on ranch work. "You built this ranch with your hands," she told Sam. "Bobby will protect it with his mind. Both are necessary." Bobby gained admission to the University of California's law school in 1900. He specialized in land and water law, critical issues in the developing West, where disputes over resources could make or break entire communities. With 2 children away at the school and William managing most of the ranch operations, Sam and Eleanor entered a new phase of their lives. They were in their late 40s, old enough to feel the years, but still vigorous and engaged. Sam's back continued to trouble him, limiting his ability to do heavy physical work. But he shifted to an advisory role, teaching the younger ranch hands, working with the horses he loved, spending time with his grandchildren. Because by 1899, there were grandchildren. William married Anna, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, in 1898. She was a sweet, hardworking young woman whom Eleanor liked immediately. In 1899, they had their first child, a daughter they named Sarah. Sam, at 48, became a grandfather. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, he felt tears prick his eyes. This tiny person represented the fourth generation, the continuation of everything he and Eleanor had built. She has your eyes, Ellie, he said, looking at the baby's hazel gaze. And your stubborn chin, Eleanor replied, smiling. Over the next decade, more grandchildren arrived. William and Anna had 4 children in total. Margaret, after completing medical school and marrying a colleague in 1901, had 2 children. Bobby, who married in 1903, had 3. By 1910, there were 9 grandchildren, ranging in age from infant to 11 years old. The ranch house, which had once seemed spacious for a family of 5, now felt wonderfully crowded during holidays and family gatherings. Sam, now 59, had mellowed with age. The stern, solitary cowboy who had stopped a woman from boarding a train 34 years earlier had been transformed by love and family into someone warmer, more patient, more content. He taught his grandchildren to ride to track animals to read the desert. He told them stories about the early days, about building the ranch from nothing, about their grandmother's courage in staying when she could have left. Eleanor, at 56, had retired from formal teaching in 1908 when her arthritis made writing on the chalkboard too painful. But she continued to tutor students privately and write articles and essays. Her voice had found an audience, and she used it to advocate for education reform and women's rights. In 1907, on their 30th anniversary, their children organized a huge celebration. Friends and family came from all over Nevada and beyond. Eleanor's sister Emily traveled from Boston with her own family. Former students, now adults with children of their own, came to honor the teacher who had changed their lives. The party lasted all day, with music and dancing and feasting. As the sun began to set and the party wound down, Sam led Eleanor away from the crowd to their special place by the spring, where he had proposed 30 years earlier. The cottonwood trees were much larger now, providing deep shade. Someone had built a bench where they could sit and watch the water. 30 years, Sam said, shaking his head in wonder. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I grabbed your wrist at that train station, terrified you would get on that train and disappear from my life forever. And sometimes it feels like we have always been together, Eleanor added, leaning her head on his shoulder. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who had taken a wild chance on each other and built something that had lasted 3 decades and would continue for generations beyond. You know what the best part is? Sam asked. After 30 years of marriage, I still learn new things about you. You still surprise me. You still make me laugh. I still want to tell you about my day and hear about yours. That has not faded at all. Because we built something real, Eleanor said. Not the romantic fantasy that is all passion and intensity, but burns out quickly. We built a partnership, a friendship, a love that grows stronger with time instead of weaker. We built a life together, Sam, and it has been a beautiful life. As the years continued, the physical toll of aging became more apparent. By 1915, Sam was 64 and Eleanor 61. Sam's back pain was chronic now, managed but never absent. Eleanor's arthritis had worsened, making many tasks difficult, but they adapted. They helped each other. They relied on their children and hired help when necessary, and they never lost the essential connection that had sustained them through decades. In 1917, autumn came early to Nevada, bringing heavy rains and unseasonable cold. Sam was out checking on cattle during one of these storms, refusing to let the younger men do all the work. He came back soaked and chilled, but thought nothing of it at first. Within 2 days, he had developed a chest infection. Within a week, it had progressed to pneumonia. At 66, Sam's body did not fight illness the way it once had. Dr. Hayes was blunt about the prognosis. At his age, with his weakened condition, this could go either way. Keep him warm, make him take the medicine, and pray. Eleanor stayed by his bedside day and night, sleeping in the chair beside him, when exhaustion forced her to rest. Their children gathered worried and helpless, watching their strong father brought low by invisible enemies inside his own lungs. Sam drifted in and out of delirium. In his fevered state, he relived memories. The train station, their wedding, the birth of each child. Moments of joy and struggle all jumbled together. In his lucid moments, he was aware of Eleanor's constant presence. Her cool hand on his forehead. Her voice reading to him, talking to him, anchoring him to life. After 2 weeks of crisis, the fever broke. Sam rallied his stubborn constitution, pulling him through against the odds. You are not getting rid of me that easily, he told Eleanor when he was finally coherent again, his voice weak but determined. I have at least another decade in me, maybe 2. But the illness had taken its toll. Sam never fully recovered his former vigor. He tired more easily. He needed more rest. The physical work of the ranch was beyond him now. William took over completely with Sam, serving as advisor and consultant. It was a hard transition for Sam, watching his son make the daily decisions, but he was proud of how capable William had become. Eleanor adjusted her own activities to stay near Sam. They spent long hours together, talking about their life, their family, their memories. The conversation was deeper now, tinged with the awareness of mortality that comes when death is brushed close. On a clear autumn day in 1919, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, Sam turned to Eleanor with an expression she had come to know well over 43 years of marriage. Something important was coming. "I need to tell you something," he said, "in case I do not get another chance." "Sam, do not talk like that," Eleanor protested, though she knew the words were coming anyway. "Just listen." He took her hand, his grip weaker than it used to be, but still warm. "I need you to know that stopping you from boarding that train back in 1876 was the single most important thing I ever did in my life. Everything good that has happened to me, everything meaningful and worthwhile stems from that one moment of courage when I decided to take a chance." His gray eyes faded now, but still piercing, searched her face. "You have been my partner, my best friend, my love, my everything for 43 years. If I died tomorrow, I would die a happy man knowing I had the privilege of spending my life with you." Eleanor was crying openly now, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks. "Samuel Garrett, you are the great love of my life. I was lost when you found me, running from one life but not sure how to build another. You did not just ask me to stay. You helped me figure out who I really was and who I wanted to be. You gave me space to grow while never letting me doubt that I was loved. That is the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." They sat together as the sun sank below the horizon and the stars began to appear. Two people who had built a lifetime of love on a foundation of chance and courage. Sam lived another 5 years, making it to their 47th anniversary in 1924. He died peacefully in his sleep on a warm summer night with Eleanor lying beside him as she had for nearly half a century. He was 73 years old, and he had lived a full, rich life surrounded by love. Eleanor mourned him deeply, feeling like part of herself had been torn away. For days after his death, she moved through the house like a ghost, touching things he had touched and sitting in places he had sat, trying to hold on to the physical reality of a man who was no longer there. But she also felt profound gratitude. 47 years, nearly 5 decades with the love of her life. How many people could say that the funeral was attended by hundreds? Friends and family came from across Nevada and beyond. Former students now middle-aged with children of their own. Business associates, ranch hands who had worked for Sam over the decades. The Chinese community led by Rose Lynn, now elderly herself. William, 50 years old and a respected rancher in his own right, spoke about his parents' love story. "My father always said that the bravest thing he ever did was stop my mother from boarding that train. But my mother used to say that the bravest thing she ever did was stay." They were both right. It took courage for both of them to take that chance to build something together when they barely knew each other, to commit to a partnership that would last their entire lives. He paused, looking out at the crowd. But that courage gave them and all of us something beautiful. Their love created a family, a legacy, and a lesson about what it means to truly commit to another person. Sam was buried on a hill overlooking the ranch where he could watch over the land and the family he had created. The simple headstone read, "Samuel Garrett, 1851 to 1924, beloved husband, father rancher." He asked her to stay, and she said yes. Eleanor continued living at the ranch, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. By 1925, there were 4 generations alive, simultaneously a web of family connections that spread across Nevada and beyond. She spent her days writing, teaching her great-grandchildren, their letters passing on the wisdom she had gained through decades of living fully. She often told the story of the cowboy who had stopped her from boarding the train, who had changed the entire trajectory of her life with one bold request. It had been the defining moment of her existence, the point where everything shifted and became possible. In the spring of 1918, before Sam's death, something happened that brought the past and present together in a way that felt almost prophetic. Their grandson, William Garrett Jr., the eldest son of William and Anna, received his draft notice for the Great War. He was 20 years old, the same age Eleanor had been, when she first contemplated leaving Boston, and he was terrified. On the night before he was to leave for the train station in Hawthorne, he sat with Sam on the porch of the ranch house. The old man, 67 now and still recovering from his bout of pneumonia the previous fall, wrapped a blanket around his shoulders against the chill. "You are scared," Sam said. It was not a question. "Yes, sir," the young man admitted. "I do not know if I have the courage for what is coming." Sam smiled, the expression tugging at the weathered lines of his face. "Let me tell you about courage, Will. Real courage. The kind that shows up when everything inside you is screaming to run, but you stand your ground anyway." And so Sam told his grandson the story. All of it. The lonely years building the ranch, the first time he saw Eleanor. The 2 months of watching from a distance, too afraid to speak. The train station. The moment of decision when he had to choose between safety and possibility. He told about the courtship, the challenges, the building of a life together. He told about hard winters and droughts and enemies and illnesses. He told about children born and family built and a love that grew deeper with every passing year. "The day I stopped your grandmother from boarding that train," Sam said as the story wound down, "I was more scared than I had ever been in my life. More scared than when I left Missouri with nothing. More scared than when I started the ranch. More scared than anything before or since." "But you did it anyway," Will Jr. said softly. "I did it anyway. Because the fear of never trying was worse than the fear of failing. And that is what courage really is, Will. It is not the absence of fear. It is action in spite of fear." Sam reached out, his weathered hand gripping his grandson's shoulder. "Tomorrow you are boarding a train to war. You are scared, and that is natural, that is human. But remember this. The Garretts have always been brave enough to take chances when it matters. We face uncertain futures with courage. We draw strength from family, and we know that some things are worth fighting for." Will Jr. looked at his grandfather, this man who had built everything from nothing, who had taken a wild chance on love and been rewarded with a life of meaning and purpose. "Did you ever regret it?" he asked. "Taking that chance with Grandma?" Sam glanced toward the bedroom window where Eleanor was resting. She had been ill recently, the influenza that was sweeping the world having found her, despite all their precautions. "Not once," Sam said firmly. "Every day I wake up beside her is a gift. 42 years, or 42 more days, I am grateful for every moment." The next morning, they all went to the train station in Hawthorne, the same platform where Sam had stopped Eleanor 42 years earlier. The same boards under their feet, though weathered now and worn by decades of traffic. Will Jr. stood in his uniform, young and scared and trying to be brave. Sam walked him to the train, the old man's steps slower than they used to be, but still steady. At the steps to the passenger car, Sam stopped. This place, this exact spot, where everything had changed. "This is where she was standing," he said quietly. "Right here. One foot on the step, ready to leave forever." Will Jr. looked around, trying to imagine it. The grandfather he knew as an old man, young and desperate. The grandmother he knew as elderly, young and defeated. "What did you say?" Will Jr. asked. "What were the exact words?" Sam smiled, remembering. "Miss Ashford, please wait." 4 words that had changed everything. The train whistle blew. Will Jr. had to board. He embraced his grandfather one last time. "Make us proud, Will. Be brave like they taught you." The young man saluted, then climbed aboard. The train began to move slowly at first, and then gathering speed. Sam stood on the platform watching until the train disappeared around the bend toward the eastern horizon. Full circle. Another generation. Another moment of courage required. He whispered so quietly that no one else could hear. "It all started right here, Ellie. All the good things." In March of 1927, Eleanor Ashford Garrett passed away at the age of 90. It was a remarkable age, especially for someone who had lived such a full and active life. She died peacefully in the same bed she had shared with Sam for 47 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Her final words spoken to the family gathered around her were simple but profound. Tell them to be brave. Tell them to take chances on love. Her funeral was even larger than Sam's had been. Eleanor had touched more lives through her teaching, and writing had inspired more people across a wider geography. Letters arrived from all over the country from former students and readers of her memoir, from women who had followed her example, and built unconventional lives. At the service, Margaret, now a successful doctor in her late 40s, spoke about her mother. My mother taught me that a woman could be anything she chose to be if she had the courage to pursue it. She showed me through her own example that love and independence were not opposites but complements, that the right partner would support your dreams rather than limit them. Margaret paused, her voice thick with emotion. She took a chance when she stepped off that train in 1876. And that single act of courage created ripples that spread far beyond this ranch, beyond Nevada, beyond anyone's ability to measure. Eleanor was buried next to Sam on the hill overlooking the ranch where they could watch over the land and the family together for eternity. Her headstone read, Eleanor Ashford Garrett, 1854 to 1927. Beloved wife, mother, teacher, friend. She took a chance on love and built a beautiful life. The Garrett Ranch continued under William's management, passed eventually to his son and then to his grandson. 4 generations worked the land that Sam had first claimed in the 1870s, each adding their own improvements and innovations while maintaining the core values of hard work, integrity, and respect for the land. The little schoolhouse Eleanor had built became a museum dedicated to frontier education, preserving her teaching materials and some of her personal effects. Her books remained in print, inspiring new generations of women to pursue their dreams and take chances on unconventional paths. But perhaps the greatest legacy of Samuel and Eleanor Garrett was not the ranch or the school or the books. It was the lesson they taught about love. That real love is not about possession or control, but about partnership and respect. That sometimes the greatest adventures begin with a single moment of courage, a willingness to take a chance on something unknown. That building a life with another person requires daily effort and commitment, but that effort is rewarded with joy and meaning and connection that lasts beyond a single lifetime. Their story became the kind of tale that people told and retold, embellishing some details, forgetting others, but always keeping the essential truth at its heart. A cowboy saw a woman about to leave, recognized something special in her, found the courage to ask her to stay, and she found the courage to say yes. And from that single moment, from that leap of faith, came a love story that endured for nearly 5 decades and created ripples that spread far beyond the Nevada desert where it began. Years later, a great-great-granddaughter of Samuel and Eleanor would stand at the train station in Hawthorne, now preserved as a historical site, and imagine her ancestors standing there in 1876. She would think about the courage it took for both of them in that moment. Sam to reach out and ask, Eleanor to trust and stay. She would think about how different all their lives would have been if Eleanor had pulled her arm free and boarded that train, disappearing into the east in the life that waited for her there. But she had not. She had taken a chance on a cowboy who saw something in her worth fighting for. And that decision had changed everything. It was a reminder that sometimes the most important moments in life are the ones where you choose to be brave, to take a risk, to say yes to possibility, even when the sensible thing would be to play it safe. The Garrett family ranch still stood a testament to the love and partnership that had created it. The descendants of Samuel and Eleanor still lived in Nevada, contributing to their communities, teaching their children the values of hard work, integrity, and courage that had been passed down through generations. And somewhere in all of them was the echo of that moment at the train station, the moment when everything changed because 2 people decided to take a chance on each other. It had been a beautiful love story, the kind that starts with a leap of faith and grows into something that transcends individual lives to become part of a family's identity, part of the landscape itself. Samuel and Eleanor had shown that true love is not just about passion and romance, though they had plenty of both. It is about choosing each other every day, about supporting each other's dreams, about building something together that is greater than what either person could create alone. Their story ended as all stories must, but the love they created continued on in their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and beyond. It continued in the ranch that still bore the Garrett name. It continued in the lessons they taught and the example they set. Most of all, it continued in the reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can do is take a chance on love, even when it seems impulsive or impractical or impossible. Because Samuel took a chance when he stopped Eleanor from boarding that train. Eleanor took a chance when she stepped back onto the platform. And together they built a lifetime of love on that foundation of shared courage and mutual respect. That was their legacy, their gift to the world. They're proof that sometimes the wildest chances lead to the most beautiful outcomes. And so their story lived on, told and retold, inspiring others to be brave, to take chances, to believe in the possibility of love, even in the most unlikely circumstances. It was a reminder that life's greatest adventures often begin with a single moment of courage, and that the best love stories are the ones where two imperfect people choose each other and then spend a lifetime making that choice worth it.